Hello, all. Happy Thursday, and welcome back to Voices of Resilience. My name is Nathan Hofer, and I'm the Director of Campus Operations for the Lost and Found Association. If you don't know who we are an organization that is focused on building resilience in young adults as a form of preventative mental health, as doing our part to give people tools, communities, and networks of support to end suicide for young adults. We want to live in a world where we don't have suicide, and I say this almost every week. I'd love to work myself out of a job, and that'd be great. And so today, if you're here and you don't know who Lost and Found is, that's who we are, what we're about, and you're just here to see our awesome guest, Susan Harder. I understand that she's grand, but before I introduce her, I want to pull some attention quick to our sponsors. If I block it with my hand, my background doesn't show it very well. But we would like to say thank you to our sponsors, the Astrup Family Foundation and American Bank and Trust, for supporting the work we do with Lost and Found and building resilience in young adults, but also for supporting Voices of Resilience. If you had asked me in March if I'd be doing a live cast like this, I would have laughed at you, but here we are. It's 2020, and we've got great stuff that we get to connect with people on. And so, speaking of great stuff and great people, I'm going to bring in Susan Harder, who we just realized it didn't click for me initially, Susan, but you brought it up to me that we really have gone together, known each other since kindergarten. That's crazy.
Kindergarten, 28 years. I did the math with you.
That's crazy. But Susan is a local mental health practitioner here in Sioux Falls, and I'm going to let her just give her background a little bit because I think it's fascinating. Because Susan, our lives have diverged and then came back together, and the things that you're doing I think are just incredible. So I'd love for you just to tell people about the work you do, and then we'll dive in.
Absolutely. Oh man, yeah, where to start? Well, I guess it's good to know my credentials. So I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm a licensed addictions counselor. I just remembered I took my exam for my licensed addictions counselor credential on March 16th, the first day that schools in Sioux Falls and maybe all throughout the state, switched to virtual learning. So, but I've been working in the field now for a couple years. I'm also a registered art therapist, which makes me kind of a unique person in the state of South Dakota. I haven't checked recently what the credentialing website, but last I checked, there were 5 or 6 registered art therapists in the state of South Dakota. And I currently work as an inpatient therapist at the Avera Addiction Care Center. We just opened back in December. I'm on maternity leave right now. I have a 7-week-old baby girl, and so I have plenty of time to sit down and talk with you about these things. But in December, I'll be returning to the Avera Addiction Care Center, where I work primarily in groups, but do individual therapy, art therapy, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
By the way, anyone who has kids knows you're lying when you say you have time, lots of free time to talk to me right now, because
that's why my mom's in the basement.
we know that's untrue. So I want to thank your mom for being there, because I have 2 kids and we're at home, and I feel like I don't have time. They're not newborns anymore.
There's no time, but there's always time for me, especially to talk about this stuff, because I love this stuff. This is the stuff that excites me. So, well,
I am so thankful that you're taking time out of your day to be here. And before we dive in here, I do want to mention, I always seem to forget, but anyone who's watching, I know we've got some live viewers here, and if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to share, please put it in the Facebook chat here in the comments, and we will get to it. And if for some reason you're watching it on YouTube, I think you can put comments there too, and we'll get to it there as well. So please, if you have any comments, let us know, because you're all tired of hearing me ask questions all the time. And frankly, I want to know what questions you have for Susan or comments. So as we go through this conversation, don't hesitate to join in and engage with us. That's why we do it live. And I'm not just, otherwise it's like it'd be like the beach body of resilience talk. And that's, well, helpful, not what we're here to do today. So Susan, like I said, I'm pumped. And can you tell me just a little bit about art? For some, like I said, I am at least have been in the counseling realm and understand a little bit about it, but also I understand nothing
about it. I don't think many people do. I am the art lady. I am the art teacher. I become a lot of different things when it comes to art therapy and working with people. So an important thing to understand about art therapy is that art therapists, we are like any other therapist that goes to school. We go to school to learn about technique and theory and skills to become a qualified mental health professional, except we have this magical little thing called art that we get to incorporate into our schooling. We get to learn about materials, how to use materials with individuals, groups, materials and how they work well with certain people, when to not use materials. Do no harm is our motto. And so we need to have a good understanding about when art materials may not be the most suitable for certain people, when it's appropriate. So yeah, we're going to not only become counselors, social workers, psychotherapists, but we're learning about how do we use these art materials to help people. And so that's really the big thing. Like I also talk with people. I do lots of talk therapy. And in fact, I really love doing art with people and then getting to talk about it, because that's kind of where the guts are. Like that's where the good meat is, because we can do it. And I think people love making the art, but when we start to kind of dig into it, that's the part that people don't necessarily understand. And that's what the art therapist is trained to do. They're trained to help guide you through your art and what you made. It may not all make sense in the current state that you're in, but that's why I tell people to hang on to their art whenever they make it, because maybe you make some art during the pandemic, and then a year or two down the road later, you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, like it kind of maybe speaks to you in a different, it takes you back is what it does. It takes you back to a certain place in time. So it can be really powerful in that way. So does that make sense? Or any other questions about what it is?
I'm sure I'll have several.
Coming. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you said, saving that art and looking at it as a point in time, I almost thought of the image that went in my head was almost like a journal.
Yes.
But it's artwork. It's something that you created. You were able to be expressive in, and do you work within, like I said, as someone who is an ignoramus when it comes to art therapy, do you work with a specific medium, or do you have multiple that you use? Do you kind of focus in on something that you think will work best with your client?
Mm-hmm. Everything. We try to be a little bit versed in everything, so that exactly that we can offer a material that works best. There are limitations sometimes, and in fact, limitations a lot of times. Art therapy and expressive therapy in general is not always like the big ticket item. And when I say that is, it's, everybody wants to have art therapy, but sometimes paying for it, or, having an art room. Not every facility can have an art room dedicated to it. So art on a cart. When I worked at Avera Behavioral Health, we had our expressive office, and they still do, and we put it on a cart and we take it onto the units, and we work in different group rooms. And so we have to be really flexible about all the different kinds of art that we use. And for instance, I would love to have like a kiln. I would love to have wheels for people to do ceramics on, even though I'm primarily a painter. I'm a 2D artist. But I think that would be incredible. Using your hands in that way, that is perfect for some people. And it really brings emotion out. It brings experiences out. People like to work with their hands. But can everybody afford to have a kiln at their facility? No, not really. So, model magic, Crayola model magic is maybe the next best thing. So you have to know, what materials are available out there and what's going to work well with certain people. And sometimes we can take a guess and people test stuff out and they're like, nope, that's not for you. We're going to move you on over here. And so, we're trained to kind of figure that out.
So, by the way, art on the cart, that's the best phrase.
Yeah.
That's good. I started rhyming things in my head. I'm like, no, this is not the time.
Don't go there.
Focus in. But I guess how have you seen? I assume I once again making some wild assumptions, but knowing that we're in the Midwest and we're in a region where it's like, I would say artistically that is not something where a lot of people are drawn to or have had that experience growing up in, like, high school or college even. So do you have people who are hesitant to engage in that and how has that still proven to be effective once you've gotten past that wall?
Oh, great question, Nathan. So many people I talk to, I can hear it over and over again. I haven't done art since elementary school. Haven't touched a crayon since elementary school. And so most people coming in are pretty hesitant. We have a couple of folks who come in, they're like, oh yeah, I used to do that in college. I used to do that in high school. A blank page for someone who has not made art in a long time, especially since elementary school, is terrifying. We're used to being adults that are in control and we look cool. We look like, we know what we're doing. And then here you come into my room and I'm giving you this stuff and I'm going to make you feel maybe kind of incompetent in something. So much of that has to do with expectations, right? And I tell people that it's like, you have this expectation that because you're an adult, you're supposed to be making some really amazing, profound art, but your skills stopped back in elementary school. So why do you have that expectation for yourself that you need to be making really amazing art? It's just about getting people comfortable with the idea that we are beginning this chapter of exploration and play. That is the thing that we really focus on, is play, because it disarms people. It takes that inhibition away. And usually once they get going, it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of fun. And, what's great about where I work is that when I'm at the Avera Addiction Care Center, we have students who are constantly coming in and going and coming in and out. And so I develop folks who are like, no, you're actually gonna make art in here today. And I give them the supplies, I get them going. They become comfortable with it and they see that, oh wow, yeah, this is kind of fun. And hey, we're not just sitting around talking about all the tough stuff that's going on. I just get to do my thing. And then they get to encourage the new people who come in and say, hey, I know you were scared. Like I was the same way. It's okay. And so it's actually been great because like they're on my team and they can pull people in. But I have had people walk out of my room before because they're like, I'm not doing this. This is kid stuff. And I've had those people come back. We dig into it a little bit. We meet them where they're at and I give them supplies, hopefully that speaks to them, and we work together, we talk it out, and pretty soon they're like, I love this. This is one of my favorite things to do at treatment. So.
Well, that's awesome. And I think what you just shared about expectations, I thought that was really profound, is that, I see it with people I work with. I've seen it with students I've worked with in the past. I see it with people I connect with today. And a lot of times conflicts and stressors come from expectations not being met, or expectations not matching up with what they have. So how have you seen, well, I do want to ask more about some of the art therapy stuff, but just in a general thing, how have you seen with your clientele? Obviously you've taken a little bit of time off for maternity leave, but you were right in the midst of it, of the transition that we are all sick of talking about with COVID coming in. But how did you see expectations and understanding of things come into play with clients, especially as we went into a realm of unknown? And also a subsequent question, you work with addiction services, addiction care. How has this scenario, what have you been seeing in how this has played out for addictions? And I have my ideas, but once again, unfounded, totally based on my own expectations of what I would think would happen. So I would love to hear your take on this and what you've seen, what you've experienced.
It's made everything a whole lot harder. It's just made everything a little more challenging. So folks who are usually coming in for treatment, we really focus on, our center focuses on co-occurring disorders, meaning people are mostly coming in, not all the time, but mostly coming in with an addiction. They have chemical dependency disorder, and then also some kind of mental health complication as well. So depression and anxiety are ripe for addiction, post-traumatic stress, so many different things, obsessive compulsive tendencies. And so first of all, making the the I guess the issues that they're already facing, elevating that, already. So the other really big thing is, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but isolation. I love listening to the Let's Talk podcast. Hazelden Betty Ford has a Let's Talk podcast, is what it's called, with Will Moyers. And he always said, and it was my favorite quote, that addiction is isolation and the antidote is community. And so what do we push? Community. That's the thing that we push the whole way through treatment. And here we are telling everybody to isolate. And it's been the hardest thing, to say, okay, well, here you go, guys. You did your 28 days plus or whatever. And now you got to go back into your homes where you used to drink or use. And that, I think, has been the biggest. I mean, we've seen it probably in our in the news. Alcohol sales are up. When you're at home, it just becomes the to use and drink again. And again, getting people to AA meetings, 12-step meetings, getting people to Smart Recovery or any kind of connection with others just made your recovery a whole lot harder. And so we're having to get really creative. For a while there were, I think, intensive outpatient programs. Typically, we recommend a step down from a residential facility to an intensive outpatient program, so that they can continue to have group support. And for a while, I know in Minnesota, they weren't running any. And so if we had residents that were leaving, we had to get really creative about, okay, well, we can't send you to IOP, but we can send you here, or we can, connect you with individual therapy. So Zoom has been something that we've recommended to a lot of people for. You can do lots of meetings on Zoom. And the crazy cool thing is you can do a 12-step meeting in New York City if you wanted to, because it's on Zoom. Like, you can go wherever you want. So in some ways that kind of presented something new for people, but also it's just the lack of community, this whole isolation thing. Tough.
Yeah, and I do have a question that came in the chat, but before I throw it in there, I want to ask us a follow-up question for you. As you mentioned, isolation and connection. You just went through an interesting life transition, as we already discussed. But what has it been like to be someone who understands the ins and outs of mental health, the ins and outs of like you said, isolation, connectivity, all these important things, but knowing that you've had to. I remember we got together like the day you were supposed to start your 3-week isolate quarantine before. I was thankful we spent a little bit of time together there, but you used that as you had 3 weeks before you were supposed to have your new baby, and you had to isolate, and now you've had to be isolated. And my wife and I were almost a year out from when Gemma was born, and we're like, man, I can't even imagine what it's like to have a baby in this scenario. Like, what does that look like? How does that? And so I would love to hear how this has been for you. And then after that, I have a question from Vicky Graber here to ask.
Yeah, I knew she'd be around.
I thought you might.
Yeah. It's been, the whole pregnancy too was just an interesting thing to try to manage. I just play by the rules that the healthcare, especially like my employer, Avera, sets forth. There are rules that we follow too. Hand hygiene is huge, and the masks. I wear them. When I'm at work, I wear them all the time. When I go out, I limited, and I still limit where I go, because I still have this newborn. We got through the first month without any illnesses, so I'm really happy about that. I know, right? Every month is a victory. So it's been hard in some ways, but in some ways, from March until I went on maternity leave, it's been kind of exhausting too. Like at work, protocol changes daily, and you're constantly on edge about how to provide all these people, with the right services, with the right support. And you're a mental health professional too, and we can't always keep it together. So, our team together, like seriously, I don't know how I would have done it without my team at work, because we all support each other so much. But I just kind of always know, and I'm the optimist. I'm always an optimist. You can ask my coworkers, you can ask my family probably. And it's just like, I assume things are just going to work out. So have that going for me. But I just try to play by the rules and do what my doctors tell me to do. And but because of kind of all that stress, I was almost really ready for that quarantine. I was just kind of ready to be like I don't have to think about all these things. I mean, art supplies. And when I was thinking about infection control, for a while, it was like, okay, everybody, I mean, we tell folks, the residents before group, wash your hands. After group, you wash your hands. And so especially like then we're touching art supplies and maybe sharing art supplies. And so that infection control thing went, when we really didn't know as much as we do now about how COVID is transmitted, it was just like, oh my gosh, I am sanitizing every pencil. How are we doing this? So it's been a ride, but even now, like, and it depends on the day. And I'm sure that's probably the same for you and for people listening. Some days we are locked in this. We are cleaning everything. We are on top of it. And then other days are just like, I want this to be over with. I am ready to move on. And okay, I washed my hands, but I'm going to Costco. So so that's kind of, that's how it goes.
It's interesting because it just registered with me that you obviously still had residents during this whole shebang when it kicked off. Like I'm sure you didn't shut down. So,
Ooh, I lost your audio. Can't hear you.
Oh, hey, there we go. Got it.
Okay.
Hey, I was gonna say, I think it must be incredibly stressful for you to be able to have had like this whole unknown, but still seeing people, because I'm sure you're not going to shut down. So I did not even think about that part of it. So golly, I bet quarantine didn't seem so bad all of a sudden.
Oh gosh. Well, and we were so nervous too about shutting down and like, what would that be like? And how do we restart this? And like, but we haven't, we've always had people, it's varied between, getting up in numbers and then it'll drop again and then go up and drop. And it just kind of depends. Yeah. I mean, and that's the world of addiction care anyway. When I worked over at Outpatient with Avera, I worked in the addiction recovery program, and it ebbs and flows and depends on the season and how things are going and when people can get to treatment. So
yeah. And as a nice segue here, I'm going to ask Vicky's question here. Is art a tool for therapy, or is the art the actual therapy? Is there a specific goal for an art session, or more of a go with the flow kind of thing?
Both, absolutely. In fact, it's really interesting. Those are questions we absolutely ask and we talk about in school, because there are times where it is just like, I just need to create and I don't know where I'm going with it, but I'm being introduced to it, and that's where we're going. And then there are times where there's like this, and I do both, actually. I do both at the Addiction Care Center. We have groups where I'm focusing on, we make these hope stones, and we focus on instilling hope because of course, when you are experiencing addiction and mental health, it's really hard to maintain that level of hope. So we do a very specific art activity where we're talking about that, emphasizing that, exploring that. And then there's every Friday I do open studio. It's my favorite time because they really, I mean, even the ones who are just like, art, it's not my favorite thing, this is kind of intimidating, they get to do what they want, and I help them along with that. And they know, regardless, it's like, you're in treatment and you're going from group to group, you're going to individual therapy sessions, and here's a group where I get to do what I want. Like, I get to really just, explore whatever I want to explore. And for the ones who are more hesitant to art, like with art, I try to encourage them, or I lead them through stuff. But it really is, that's the go with the flow art, open studio. And I love it. Like I said, because there's this activity that happens. People are working on stuff together. People are encouraging each other. It's kind of beautiful. So yeah, there's room for both in the world of art therapy.
That's awesome. Yeah. And as we, like I said, kind of a segue, well, not really, not a smooth segue, but I am curious about what you're seeing with addiction care. I mean, what do you see? Well, once again, unsurprisingly, I have a twofold question. One, what do you see as kind of like the the major precursors for addiction? What are some of these things that you have? I know there's no common point, but if you had to kind of identify some things that lead people towards addictions, but also what have you been seeing since this, as you mentioned, alcohol sales have gone up since March for some reason. And I saw something the other day that made me chuckle. Said, in 2040, we're going to have our whole next generation that were homeschoolers raised by day drinkers. And I was like, ooh, too soon.
Yeah,
Too soon.
right.
But also maybe.
Right. Well, sorry. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm just curious what you've seen and how you see people get to this point.
Yeah. And the truth is, while it's that day drinker comment, we live in a majority rules society, and the truth is the majority of people don't get addictions. So roughly we kind of say 10-11% of the population are struggling with an addiction, and even a smaller percentage of that actually go to treatment to address it. And so sorry, the beginning of your question, can you say that part again?
Oh, I was just saying, if you had some commonalities that you see which lead people towards an addiction.
It's going to be different for everyone, and so what happens is we look at it from a biopsychosocial standpoint, and I love that word. It's been one of my favorite words. It sounds complicated, and it's not. Biological, psychological, social. We think about genetics. Did your parents have or grandparents have an addiction? That makes it more likely for you to have an addiction. Psychological, any mental health complications that you have, because substance use with mental health complications tends to be, oftentimes people tend to self-medicate. And so again, makes it more likely. Back to biological too, use at an early age. When your brain is forming, our brains don't form fully until about the age of 25, 30. I hear more so the middle of the road, 25 these days. But that prefrontal cortex where you make all those decisions, when substances are introduced to your body at an early age and to your brain at an early age, we have things that we care about. We go to school, we like to sleep, we like food, we like girlfriends and boyfriends, whatever. When substances are introduced and you already have perhaps you have that genetic component, you're maybe struggling with a mental health complication, you have low self-esteem, put those things together, and in your brain and with continued use, your brain starts to move substances to the top of the list. All of a sudden, oh yeah, it's not as important that I hang out with my girlfriend anymore. I'd rather, go use, or go hang out with my using friends. My girlfriend doesn't like it that I use, whatever. I have that big exam tomorrow, but I'm probably just gonna my friends are having a party. I'm gonna go do that instead. And I'm sure I'll be fine on the exam. It's just things start to drop in the list that are priorities. Substances, when they get really bad, that's when, say meth, sleep is not, meth use to a severe extreme can, you can be up for days, and it can be very hard on your body. So again, it's the more addictive substances, or the more addictive a substance becomes, it starts to rise in priority. And again, there are all these factors that impact that. So did I answer all the question?
Probably.
Sounds good.
And I think something that I was recently, challenged to think about, which it made a lot of sense, of course, but when you think of addictions, we think of the negative we think of the negative pieces. We think of the, the ones that are, like you mentioned, like meth or, drug or substance abuse or something like that. But we can have addictions to, the internet, your phone,
Yes.
You mentioned food or something like that. Yet, a lot of those things, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like those are not the ones that you see commonly going to get being dealt with in a clinical setting. Is that fair, or am I?
We don't deal with those things in a clinical setting. We've already noticed a variety of our residents struggling with eating disorders as well. And we don't specifically emphasize that. I know I was talking to you about Rogers, the Rogers facility in Wisconsin. I know that they have a very good, eating disorder clinic there, because we don't necessarily think about that, but that, eating disorders and addiction, they go hand in hand. And there's a euphoria, there's a rush that actually is developed when you have an eating disorder and engage in those activities. But I know on a grander scale that there are facilities that do address those things. We specifically focus on the main chemical dependency issues, but I think about it on a daily basis. If for those of us who maybe don't have a chemical dependency issue or haven't had one in the past, you can think about it, and maybe we're never going to really understand it from that full perspective. But yeah, like how many of us pick up this thing like the first thing in the morning and I know, and zone out. We're not feeling good. We're tired. I don't have the energy to do anything. Let's look at this thing and just numb, and sometimes that's the same experience that people are looking for in substances. So
have you seen within addictive behaviors, have you seen a common comorbidity? Because in my head, I assume there'd be some things that in a certain state, being in a depressive state, you might turn to something to, like you already said that, to self-medicate, but I'm wondering if you see something that's some of these that are pretty regularly, connected to an addictive behavior.
Yeah. Depression and anxiety are the biggest ones. We see that most common. Definitely post-traumatic stress can be another really big one. We see that one maybe not quite as, depression and anxiety are almost like how we just almost expect it. Because the interesting thing is, if you didn't have depression or anxiety before you had an addiction, once you get into the addiction and start to experience the consequences of an addiction, you will have anxiety, you will have depression, because, your addiction starts to take over your life and you start losing things. And all of a sudden, wow, my mom doesn't want to talk to me. I lost my job. And, or wow, I hope they don't find out about this. Anxiety can occur. Or I had a guy who was drinking a bottle of wine a night and had significant issues with anxiety. And sure enough, when he stopped drinking, the anxiety went away. And so, that's why, so often, our psychiatrist doesn't want to give anyone medication right away when they get in. People don't always appreciate that because if you have disorders and you normally take medication for them, and then you come into the facility and then, doctor wipes you clean, it's just, he doesn't want to medicate something that's not actually there, because the problem is with substance use, disorders can result. And so they were purely caused, some of them are potentially caused by the substance use. And so we don't want to treat something, give you medication that is treating something that isn't actually there. So
that's really interesting.
Yes,
that's really, wow. I did not know.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. It makes sense though, because you think, as you mentioned, the person drinking the bottle of wine, you'd think they were doing that to medicate from the anxiety, and that the wine drinking itself wasn't the precursor.
And I can't tell you how many assessments I've done now where, I'm asking them, okay, addiction, anxiety, depression, how did that form, or what was going on with your drinking there? Oh, well, I drank, and the more, it would be fine at first. And when I first started drinking or using marijuana, for instance, to medicate the depression or the anxiety, it worked at first. But the problem is that your body is going to create a tolerance to it. As you continue to increase, that has all these effects on the chemicals in your brain and your body. And then eventually, it actually is the source of the anxiety. And they would say, oh yeah, it would work at first, but then I had to keep drinking or keep using. And, by the time next morning rolled around, and that substance, usually in their withdrawing process, they would often have the anxiety and depression hit them like a train. So,
Oh
yeah,
gosh, that's interesting. But I mean, it makes sense. It's that you develop a tolerance to something,
yeah,
and you need more of it,
yeah.
whether that's, whatever that is, whether it's alcohol or cake, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. I mean, we feel it when it's introduced into our bodies. It's just creating the awareness of that
Hmm.
is interesting, because sometimes all we can focus on are the bad things, right? Like, I'm feeling so depressed. I'm feeling so anxious. I just don't want to feel this. I want to feel something else, anything. And so when you start to have this one track mind of, this is the feeling I got to get rid of, you don't recognize. We always talk about, you can't selectively numb. You can't say, I would like to numb that feeling. I mean, we try to do that with medication, right? But we can't, even sometimes that's not perfect. But especially with alcohol and marijuana, you cannot say, I would like only the positive feelings in my body, please, not the negative ones. You numb everything. So and which is often why people say, yeah, my mom feels like she doesn't know me anymore, or I feel like I'm a different person. People say
Hmm.
I'm a different person, because it numbs our whole self. So
That's really intense. And
yeah.
something you mentioned, talking about the development of the prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
it just popped in my head. And for those of you who don't know, I mentioned in the intro, but we focus pretty heavily in young adulthood, and we're very much present in the realm of post-secondary education, so higher ed, things like that. And that 18 to 24 age range, that's often present in that typical time frame, what we think of as a college student, or those college years, those
Hmm.
formative years. Right now we're in a whole new world for that. But I wanted your input on this. Like, we know that depression and anxiety are the two number one things that students are dealing with. Informal feedback over the course of this year, depression has kind of topped anxiety this year, which is not abnormal, but not normal. Usually anxiety is the number one thing. So when you have depression and anxiety kind of running relatively rampant. I think one statistic I saw yesterday was there was almost a 10% increase from last year to this year of people seeking counseling resources for depression. Mind you, all self-reported stuff in this
Yeah.
article, with
Hmm.
depression and anxiety on running kind of, I said running rampant, but on the rise. And then also when you're, I know I was in this space, so I'm maybe projecting, but when you're in those college years, you're really trying to find your identity. And so how does that shape? I mean, in your experience and your own take on it, like, how do those depression, anxiety, looking for identity, and then introduction of something like alcohol or drugs, what does
Hmm.
that set people up for in the future?
Yeah. It's interesting, because it's this search for identity, but sometimes it can actually be this. I mean, sometimes it is just an exploration, right? But sometimes it's this kind of going down the rabbit hole of moving away from your identity, really, like, you know, kind of just numbing it a little bit. In my mind, I mean, just kind of my perspective, is it is a time for exploration, and for the majority of people, it's probably going to work out okay. But again, we don't always know. We don't always know what's going to come of substance use, right? I mean, opioid crisis is the perfect example. People went into the hospital, had a surgery, and were given, some kind of opioid, and they felt like Superman, or felt better than they ever have. And not everybody experiences that. That's just the case. Like, I went in, when I had my son, they gave me, hydrocodone, and I was not a fan. I was just like, oh, well, that takes care of the pain, but I don't like this feeling. For some people, that's the case. And for other people, and the truth is, we can try to guess what's coming down the road, but we don't know for sure. Like, again, if you have a family member who, parents or grandparents or anyone who has an addiction or mental health complication, best to stay away from that stuff. But it's hard when the culture is what the culture is. And I have that conversation with so many residents. They're like, I gotta, even when we're looking for collage materials in magazines. How many beer, alcohol ads are there? Sporting events, professional sporting events are sponsored by, alcohol. It is a world that is catered. And so when you're the minority, you have to adjust things the way you need to adjust them so that you can live a life in recovery. And sometimes that is extremely difficult. And honestly, it's easier to just give into the addiction, which is really frustrating and sad for a lot of folks. But yeah, sorry, I went really kind of off in a different world there. But yeah,
don't be sorry.
Makes
that
sense.
Was good.
Makes sense. Okay. But yeah, no, I feel for folks who have an addiction, because the world's not necessarily like this world. Our culture in the United States is not necessarily built for them to be successful in their addiction or in their recovery, so that they can manage their addiction.
Yeah, and maybe you can choose not to answer this question, but it's just something I was thinking about here, and without you don't have to get into detail or anything. But have you ever had someone in your sphere who's been dealing with this? That's not just someone you work with or like a client. I'm talking about because I've had friends and family members who have dealt with an addiction that I couldn't see at the time,
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to hear if you've had that experience, and then did it did it spur you in this direction, or was it something that you've dealt with after you've become knowledgeable and aware of it? Maybe you haven't. I don't know. It's a thought I just had, and I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. No, I'm always happy to tell folks, and I think my good friend, he has been sober now for about 8 years, a friend of my husband and mine. And I think he'd be fine with me talking about it. But, he himself did not spur me into working in this field. And in fact, I never planned on working in the addiction field. It was not, I took an addictions course in my master's degree. And I was like, this is a world that doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. But my very good friend, when we were still in college and right after college, I knew there was a problem. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Right? Like you said, it's like I never really understood. I didn't grow up in a home that had addiction, and so to recognize it, if you don't know what you're seeing, man, where's the rule book on this? How do you figure it out? And for so many family members I work with now too, they're like, I don't what am I supposed to do? And so education for family is something we really emphasize. But actually, no, I was thinking about it too, because, I never thought I would work in addiction. I got set up with a supervisor over at Outpatient, Jen, who was my supervisor for 4 years. And for my licensure, and really she introduced me to the world of working in addiction, and she saw that as an opportunity for me to continue my career and bring some art therapy over to the outpatient facility. And yeah, when I got over there, I was still pretty fresh, just starting to take addictions courses, and knowing that I wanted to get into the field or get my license for it, become a duly licensed therapist. And I remember starting and being like, this, at first I was like, I can work in this field. Yeah. And then I was like, wow, this is something else. But my gosh, I can't imagine going back now, because now it really just feels like I can understand mental health in so many different ways. And through the lens of addiction and recovery is amazing. We've had people go through our IOP program, and one of them saying everybody should go through this program. Not just people who are suffering with an addiction. It's about creating insight and awareness, and just how do you live a happier, healthier life in general? And I was like, okay, that's something I can offer people, not having had my own addiction. And I can offer healthy alternatives, and I can offer art. And so those were the things I was at least excited about. But now I can't imagine not having my license and working in this field. So,
and as we kind of get towards the time of winding down a little bit, I do have a couple other, I would say last thoughts. I know, 45 minutes in, who knew?
Oh.
No, I'm curious, what can you for someone who's out there watching right now or later, these are people can watch them whenever. But what can you tell them to look out for if you to see someone struggling? Like what are some symptoms? What are some things that they should be looking for? If they don't, like, you don't know what you don't know, and if you like, what can we be looking for to see someone who might be in need, and then what can we do to support them in those times? Or if it's ourself, what can we do for ourselves?
Yeah, right. It's interesting. Sometimes, I mean, the truth is, like, it puts goggles on. Mental health complications and addiction puts these rose-colored glasses on of some sort, and we can't. It takes away the self-awareness that we need to better care for ourselves. And sometimes when we're going through a tough time, we don't see that. And so that's why community is really important. Isolation is something that people really kind of need to look out for, especially now, because, we're not going to hear from people for a while, right? It's because everyone's taking care of themselves by staying in. Do folks a favor, send them a text and tell them you're thinking of them, ask them how they're doing, because we don't have necessarily those visual cues anymore, right? But otherwise, people who are not doing their typical activities, who are pulling away maybe from things that they typically do. Something that, of course, we always look for is when people start to give things away. That's a kind of a cue for potential for suicide. So we want to look for that. But yeah, kind of when people kind of stop doing what they normally do. If you just notice a depressed mood, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, and guilt, shame, anything like that. I know we can't have the crystal ball in front of us and see how everything's going all the time, but just looking for those basic cues, but for sure nowadays, isolation. And if someone has a tendency, if you're like, oh, I know this person has seasonal affective disorder or struggles with depression, struggles with anxiety, whatever, just check in on them, because we're moving into that season now where, especially with flu season and the COVID stuff going on, and the days are getting darker. I hate it.
It's the worst.
I have to wake up to pure darkness. I know that daylight savings coming, but this is a hard time of year, and so we need to kind of just be looking out for other folks and ourselves. We just have to tap into if you have a tendency to maybe want to self-medicate, whether that's alcohol, other substances, notice you're zoning out. We're not as active. I think activity is huge. I love exercise now that I don't have my huge baby bump anymore. Like 3 days before my 6-week appointment, I was like, I know my doctor's supposed to say yes, I can start working out again, but I was like, I need those endorphins and I need to feel good again. So getting out of the house, bundle up and get moving. Those are huge things for kind of combating that, but don't numb is the idea. If you're spending a lot of time on your phone, like I said, or using more substances, take a day or some time to meditation is great. I'm a huge proponent of that. But really take care of yourself and tune into yourself and your emotions. Emotions are not permanent. They are information. If you are feeling lonely, or if you are feeling isolated, sad, angry, whatever, just recognize, like, it's okay, like, that's all right. It's just information. And go get an assessment done if you're not sure. If you have like more serious issues, it's not no harm to check in, like get a checkup, like a doctor's checkup. You're going to go in over at 33rd and Cliff, Vera Addiction outpatient building. We do assessments for both mental health and addiction issues. So just go see a professional, check in. Not a bad idea. And oftentimes insurance has great copays. So
nice. And I know you've sent a large number of resources, which I just posted in the comments. Okay. So there's a list of those there. And then I think it's really, thank you for sharing that piece about what to look out for. And I think it's interesting that you say isolation, because we are all supposed to be isolating. And so it's
Just
it's
think.
yeah, it's going to take, like you said already, but I'm going to say it again, intentionality. We got to be intentional and reach out and think about those in our sphere. And for those who are listening too, I mean, I'm guilty of it. People reach out to me and I don't respond because I'm like, I'll get to it, but that's how we stay connected. I think that's great. And do you have any last things you want to share? Things that you're like, I like to end on a note of hope and optimism. But before I ask that, this Paula Verdu.
Who's that?
Who's that? That's not how you smell Schmeichel. I don't
She's
understand.
such a business person. So interesting.
Yeah, no. Well, I agree though. It has been really interesting. I've learned a ton. But what are some of these things that you've seen, that you see that that you're excited about, that's coming down the pipe, that you see? I like to end on a note of positivity. So what do you see? What are the good things that you see coming down the pipe?
We're gonna get through it. I'm just that external optimist. I'm all sorts of kinds of optimist. I have my bad days too, but I really do just think it is the whole, we just got to go through this. There's no way through it but through it. And especially, we're moving into winter. Spring is going to be coming. I think this whole country is just, we're flying a little bit by the seat of our pants, and we got to kind of, in the world of art therapy, we think about this as transitional space. We have a blank sheet of paper and we have no idea what to do with it, and we're trying to figure it out. It's problem solving. Creativity is problem solving. Art making is problem solving, and of course I look at it through that lens, but it is not something we're comfortable with. But man, if I've ever been put through something uncomfortable, and I have many times, I feel better after I get through it. It's like, oh, I did it. I maybe didn't look beautiful doing it, or I didn't it wasn't graceful. So I wouldn't say we're going through this terribly gracefully, but we're moving forward, and we're learning things all the time. But I think just take care of each other and be very kind to each other. And I know that's hard sometimes when the world is kind of the way it is right now, but be kind.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you want to connect with Susan, here is her website. It's www.susanharder.com. Also, before I share something else, yes, high five, Paula. Okay. Right to you.
She's like, yeah, promote yourself. Marketing.
Yeah. No, but Susan, susanharder.com. We can toss it in the comments as well. So feel free to reach out to her. And if you're struggling, if you want to connect, feel free to reach out to us on our social media platforms as well, at Resilient Today. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And apparently we're moving on to TikTok. So that's something that's happening. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not the one leading that charge, but I'm not mad about it either, because when the pandemic hit, that was some of the most genuine laughter I've had in a long time.
The kids will love it. Kids will love it.
Yeah, it's cool. But anyways, we're not there really yet. But we're thinking about it. But anyways, check it out there. And if you want to see our website, take away the @ put a www on the front and a .org on the end, and you can check out our website and see any of our chapters that we have at campuses. We have access to resources as well, and great people like Susan. So if you need to connect, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And I just want to say thank you, Susan, for joining us today. It's great. A lot of fun.
I've my hair in weeks, so thank you for.
Me too.
Dusting this off a little bit.
You look great. You always do, though. So.
Thank you. You too.
Oh, goodness. And so anyways, next week we've got Nicole Kelly. She's got a really great story. I hope you tune in next Thursday. Then after that, we have Brian Fleming, who also has a really, he is going to be talking about adapting to changes as he is, it's on Veterans Day. He is a veteran. It's going to be an interesting conversation. So join us the next couple of weeks. And thank you for being here, especially as we've really been focusing this month on mental health and making sure that we had World Mental Health Day this month. And so it's something we want to be talking through. So Susan, you're great. I'm sure your team's great. Feel free to reach out to them at any point, and we will see you all next Thursday. Bye, everyone.